Let's play 20 strong Solar Sentinels. Now, Solar Sentinels is a very difficult game, so we're going to teach it in steps to make it easier to play. First, divide the deck into the yellow conflict cards, the blue mission cards, the red boss cards, and 3 hero cards. For the first level of gameplay, where you're just learning to play the game without being overwhelmed, we're not going to play with the mission cards or the boss cards. The hero cards are double-sided, so just pick a hero, either randomly or select one you want to start with, and put the others away. Now go through the conflict deck and divide it up into level 2 and level 1 cards and put the level 2 cards aside. That will give you 26 cards. Randomly remove 2 of them from the deck and then create 3 stacks of 8 level 1 cards. In the normal end game, you'll fight a boss, but in this simplified game, we'll just randomly draw a level 2 card and let that be the boss. But for now, just place out your hero card in front of you, then get out the health, strategy, and recovery die and set them to the value shown on the card. Then put that underneath the 3 stacks of 8. And finally, put your pool of 17 unit dice to the side and you're ready to start the game. The back of the Solar Sentinels booklet has the flow of the round, but let's walk through that. The basic flow is you'll activate one of the enemies and have battle with him. You'll roll dice to defeat the enemy and gain rewards. You'll exhaust dice, but then you can recover some of them. Then all active enemies will be discarded, and you will discard one enemy from the top of one of the 3 stacks. You'll repeat this until it's time to face the boss or you've run out of health. So let's dive into this a little bit more. First of all, if any of the enemies have an orange symbol on it or an orange border, then they are a mandatory enemy that you must fight. So you have to activate an orange enemy. If there are multiple orange enemies, you get to choose which one you want to activate. Some enemies have a plus next to a skull on it. If you activate that enemy, after the activation, you must activate the number of enemies that you can see noted by the skull. So in this case, we would activate an additional enemy. Which enemy you choose to activate depends upon a number of things, including the health that they have, meaning how difficult they are to defeat, the amount of damage that they'll do to you if you don't defeat them, the effects associated with the enemy that you're attacking, and the rewards that you might gain. So let's dive into the details of some of the effects. This symbol right here means during, so it applies as soon as this enemy is activated, and it lasts until the enemy is defeated. So that would be a reason to try to defeat these enemies first. This star symbol means it's a special effect, and it applies as soon as you activate the enemy, but it usually takes effect based upon some action that happens, such as defeating the enemy. This double arrowhead symbol is the after effect, and it's applied during the resolve phase of the engagement. Now let's focus on some of the reward symbols. This lightning bolt symbol is an immediate effect, so as soon as this enemy is defeated, you gain the reward. So that can happen even in the middle of an engagement. The downward facing arrow is an item, so when you, during the resolve phase, you gain this to your inventory, and you can use it once. The number of items you can have in your inventory is limited by the value of your strategy die. You cannot gain an item if you don't have room for it in your inventory, but you can use existing items in order to make space, but you can't use an item that you haven't yet gained. The infinity symbol represents ongoing effects, and once you have defeated this enemy, you gain this ability, and it doesn't go away for the rest of the game. It's not limited by your strategy die. Now let's walk through the basics of a battle, or what is called an engagement in 20 Strong. The essence of the battle is determining how many and which die you want to roll, because at the end of the engagement, you're going to lose them. The statistics for each of the die are shown on page 7 of the basic rule book, but every die has one side that has a critical hit, which is worth 2 damage. Then they have a mixture of single hits and misses. The other thing to recall is that you have a strategy die that tells you the number of times that you can roll your dice. From your pool of available dice, you determine the number of dice that you want to commit to the engagement. You then roll the dice and, based on the results, determine how many of them you want to apply to the different enemies. Whenever an enemy is defeated, you turn the card sideways and you gain any of those rewards that were instant rewards. You gain them right away. Based upon your strategy die, you can roll again. So for example, we can roll up to 2 times. So any dice that we don't apply have to be re-rolled again. They are fully committed to the entirety of the engagement, but you can also add more dice and roll them. Once you have completed the number of strategy phases that you're allowed, you move to the resolve phase of the engagement. So first you must suffer damage based upon any undefeated enemies, so in this case 2 damage. You then resolve any after effects. That's again the symbol with the double right facing arrows. Then all dice that were committed to the engagement, whether they were applied or not, are exhausted, which means that you move them to a special area for exhausted die. At this point, we want to point out the difference between being exhausted and banished. If a die is banished, it's removed from the game. However, exhausted die can be recovered. In fact, that is the next step after you exhaust the die. You look at your last die and recover the number of dice that it's shown here. For example, 2 in this case. So I return any 2 die that I choose from the exhausted area to my dice pool. The next step is to recover any rewards that I gain from defeated enemies, and that includes items or ongoing effects. That of course does not include the instant rewards which you've already gained. The last step of the resolve phase is cleanup, and in that case you remove or discard all enemies, whether they're defeated or not. Then you discard 1 non-mandatory card from one of the 3 stacks. Now's a good time to pause the video and try it yourself. Pick one of the cards on top of the stack and activate them. Don't forget that you have to activate mandatory enemies if they're there. Then engage in a battle and see if you can defeat them. One strategy tip is to think of health as a resource. Sometimes it's difficult to defeat some of the enemies, and so it may be better just to let them attack you and suffer the damage. So give that a try, and then we'll talk about the end game. At the start of a round, if any one of the stacks is empty, you can trigger the end game, although you don't have to unless all 3 stacks are empty. In the main game, you would activate a boss at this time, but in this basic introductory game, we'll just randomly draw any level 2 enemy and activate them as the boss. Now, in the main portion of the game, if you remember, at the end of an engagement, all of the enemies are discarded, even if they're not defeated. However, in the end game, you continue to battle the boss until they're defeated, and you do not activate any more enemies. So that's the basic mechanics of Solar Sentinels. So give that a try and play that a number of times until you become comfortable with that. The next level of gameplay would be to include all of the level 2 cards, except pull out 3 level 2 cards that you will use as the boss in this second level of gameplay. And finally, let's talk about the official level of gameplay, which includes the missions and the bosses. So during the setup, you'll mix all the level 1 and 2 cards together so that you'll form 3 stacks of 15 cards each. You'll shuffle the 4 boss cards together and form a face-down stack. Now, during the game, some of these cards may allow you to interact with that stack. Next, take the blue mission cards, shuffle them up, and deal 4 face-up from left to right. Choose to discard one of them and keep the others in the same order. You can see how to complete a mission just by reading the text on the card. You have to complete missions from left to right, but you can decide to forfeit a mission by just moving it to the side. Some missions may require that you keep track of a count, and so you can use the counter chip in order to do that. When you complete a mission, you can just move it to the side. Any missions that aren't completed by the time that the in-game triggers add to the boss's entourage. We'll talk about that in a second. Once a stack is empty, you don't place cards back on that area. Any effect that would cause a card to go on that stack is just discarded from the game. If for any reason you need to add more enemies than are available in the stacks, you just use as many as you can and then stop. The one exception is when you trigger the boss. The boss always has a number of enemies that it's to add, and that is called their entourage. So in example here we have 3 cards that we need to add. So we should be able to bring down 3 enemies. If there's not enough, then we shuffle up all the conflict cards into a new stack and draw from there. Whenever we're drawing cards, we ignore the plus symbol, plus skull, on the cards that we pull down. And this is where we're saying that any incompleted missions add to the entourage of the boss. When we're activating the boss, there are certain effects during the normal game that cause you to reveal a boss, and so if a boss is revealed, you activate that one. Otherwise, you randomly choose one of the bosses. And the final thing to know, to win the game, you do not have to defeat all of the entourage enemies, but you only need to defeat the boss. If you do that, you win the game. But of course, if anything causes your health to drop below 1, you lose the game. And that's how you play 20 strong Solar Sentinels. Enjoy playing the game.